Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, to Gar. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Suns, Booker for the win. Yes!
Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam.
For his next look, and that one won't go, and the rebound's controlled by the Suns. Here it comes quickly to Payne. Payne on the drive. Cam Johnson for three. Yeah! He got it! He got it! He got it! Cam Johnson got it! And the Suns have won the ball game. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a somewhat infrequent podcast about the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, what's going on, my friend?
We are back, Max, and I am very excited to jump back on the mics, as I always am, but we've been bouncing around this particular topic for a couple of weeks now and trying to find the right time to jump on, and as I've said to you off air already, I am really, really excited to jump into this podcast in particular with you, Max.
Me too. This one I think is long overdue, not only from us, but from a lot of people. I think this needs to be talked about more, this subject. As you all may have surmised from us titling the episode The Full Monty, today is all about Monty Williams. At least that's what it means, David, right? We're not trying our hand at becoming male strippers, are we?
I haven't talked to you about that approach we've had from a certain business yet, but we'll get to that later.
I actually watched that movie lately. It's pretty good. I don't know if you've seen The Full Monty.
I have.
It's not bad. So we all know every Suns fan loves Monty Williams, right? He's a 100% approval rating among the fan base. I think it's safe to say.
I hope so.
But he also seems like he's under-discussed and under-emphasized. At least we think so. Which actually is often a sign of a good coaching, as if they're not being talked about very often.
Very true.
But today we're going to give him the attention he deserves, aren't we, David?
Yeah, I think we kind of stumbled into this with an off-air conversation that we were having. We always talk about it, doing these infrequent podcasts. We kind of want to do something a little bit different that isn't being done, elsewhere, either in the Suns Twitter sphere or by national media. And yeah, I agree with you. I think Monty is under-discussed. I think it was probably a big reason that he didn't win Coach of the Year from the media, at least last season. He got it from his peers, obviously. And I guess this is our small little addition into the general discussion about Coach of the Year, because I think we both agree that he definitely deserved it last year and deserves it just as much this year, Max.
Yeah, at least Tom Thibodeau has followed up his season with another great season, though, this year. He's not being called to be fired by every Knicks fan or anything. All right, so before we get into any of that stuff about Mr. Williams, how about a recap of how his Suns have been playing lately, David?
Let's do it, Max. The last time we spoke in podcast form on our Phoenix Suns, we were 19-4, and I believe we shared first place in the division, conference, and entire NBA with the Golden State Warriors. Of course, the Suns now hold first all on their own, outright, and at the time of recording this podcast, just to put it in perspective for everyone listening, with 12 games remaining, Phoenix are 56-14. In days gone by, Max, I'd run through our results since last recording, but that would require going through 47 different games and box scores. So instead, like I always like to do with you, let's play a little game instead, shall we?
Let's do it. Sounds fun.
Let's decide right now if you think the Suns are going to break the franchise record for total wins, which currently sits at 62. So I want one word from you, Max. Win or loss as I go through these last few games. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
At home to Chicago.
Chicago doesn't beat anybody good, so that's a win.
At Sacramento.
I'm going to give us a win on that one. That team is sort of spiraling.
At Minnesota.
Loss.
At Denver.
Win.
At home to Philly.
Win.
We go up to Golden State.
Win after this F news.
Across to Memphis.
Loss.
At OKC.
Win.
versus the embarrassing Los Angeles Lakers.
I'm certainly not going to say loss there, David. That's a win.
And then over to LA to play the Clippers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a loss on that.
At Utah.
Win.
Final game of the season at home to the Sacramento Kings.
So I think I've already exceeded the record, right? So I think that'll probably be a loss because we won't care. But I'm going to give it a win anyway. Win.
Yeah, we might do what we did last year against, was it the Spurs when Eats-One More had his little moment?
Yes, when Eats-One More, yep. That's right. The only time Chris Paul rested the whole season.
Sorry for the delay there. I was just adding up. You did get to 9 extra wins, I believe, out of the 12 games. As I'm sure everyone listening who maybe didn't notice already, we play away from home quite a lot in these last 12 games. But with our record currently at 56, Max, that means you are guessing that the Phoenix Suns are going to win 65 games, which would... I guess beat the record, break the record, smash the record, and make it 65 for Phoenix.
I'll tell you what, I've been obsessed with this for the last 2 weeks, like obsessed with it, and I thought it was gonna be way harder, but Philly, it doesn't look very good, and then also the Golden State thing with Steph, that made it a lot easier, honestly.
Yeah, I got to admit, when I wrote down the teams and you kind of just go off reputation, it looked like quite a tough run home, but I can't say I disagree with too many of your choices there, and there's obviously a little buffer there to maybe drop 1 or 2 of those games and still break the record. So I'm very hopeful, but let's round out the recap like we always do with news and health. And I guess on the news front, we're still awaiting anything to do with the Sava investigation, so there's nothing to talk about there, which I'm kind of glad about because we don't get to talk very often, Max, and I'd rather not be focusing on that. But there are some murmurs around the media kind of alluding to the fact that there might be something coming soon on that, so we'll have to wait. And I've got to mention this one. We signed somebody, Max. Do you know his name?
No, I know he's at the first. Is he the first Dutch player ever? He's the first something player ever in the NBA.
Danish. First
okay.
Danish, yes. The first Danish player, Ife Lundberg, a 6'4" combo guard. As you said, he is Danish, comes from CSKA Moscow after leaving Russia with what's going on there. He's 27 years old and goes into a two-way spot. As we've discussed before, those guys aren't eligible for the playoffs. So it's a bit of a weird timing signing, but I'll throw this question your way. 15th man come playoff time, is it Peyton, Ish Wainwright, or this guy we have really no idea about, Max?
I didn't realize that we had to make that decision, actually. I think because of the holiday thing and because he's playing well, it'll be Ish, my guess. Also, I think we have the least depth there. I mean, if we have our old guys back, but, if Cam goes down again. By the way, maybe you're getting to this. What the hell's going on with Cam Johnson?
Well, that's a great segue from a couple of things you've mentioned there to health, because we've got a few people on the report right now. As you mentioned, it's kind of highlighted, particularly with this first guy missing the last game and Ish Wainwright needing to play, that, there probably is a need for Ish to take that 15th spot over Peyton. We don't need to go into it any more than that. But to go on health, probably in order of hopefully how they're likely to return here, Jay Crowder's missed the last game with a groin strain. Cam Johnson, as you mentioned, has missed the last 4 or 5 games now with a right quad contusion. I believe it was a Mitch Robinson knee to his thigh on one of those drives. Thankfully, he played the game out because that was obviously his famous last game now, for now at least. Frank Kaminsky, right knee stress reaction, but there seems to be some murmurs that he might be back soon. Chris Paul seems to be ahead of schedule with his right thumb avulsion fracture. And then we have Dario Saric rounding it out with right again. They're all right. I don't know if Jay Crowder's groin strain is right or left. They don't quite go into detail on those ones, but everyone else is on the right-hand side of their body. And a few people have asked me recently, Dario can play. Just because they use the DPE on Aaron Holiday doesn't disqualify Dario from coming back. It just means that they think it's very, very unlikely that he will. So if anyone's wondering or worrying about that, technically Dario could come back in the playoffs if he was good to go. But yeah, Cam, bit of a weird one. It kind of happens with these. Here's an Australian word for you. I don't know if you use it over here.
Okay.
Corky. We call them corkies, Max.
Corky. No, was that a bruise?
Yes, a contusion, as you guys call it.
Well, we don't call no one ever says that besides sports media reporters. We call it a bruise. But no, yeah, it's weird because I did see, I don't remember who, I mean, I'm sure more than one person tweeted this, but that he missed 10 games, I think maybe his rookie season or the season after that with a contusion of some kind.
Interesting.
So maybe Cam Johnson just has like the most bruisable legs ever or something. But yeah, it's a little concerning because obviously a lot of it is because the Suns won't update anybody on anything ever when it comes to injuries.
Yep.
So we don't have any sort of timeline, but you know, it's definitely lingering longer than we, I think, all thought and hoped it would linger.
Yeah, well, let's quickly look back. Maybe they didn't want him to go on aeroplanes and that road trip. We play Chicago next. I can't remember if I've seen anything about him.
Yeah, so I think it was when right before we started. You may have missed this. They said Jay Crowder is questionable for tomorrow, and Cam Johnson is out.
All right. Well, 3 road games after that. So yeah, hopefully he's back for that road trip. Maybe.
Yep, and I understand why they're not rushing him. If there's any reason at all to be cautious, they should be cautious.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. We ready to go on? Any more recap?
That is the end of our recap, Max.
All right, then we're going to start our Monty Williams discussions.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. It's a great day to be a Suns fan and a member of the Suns family. As we welcome Monty Williams as the next coach of the Phoenix Suns. Monty is a man of integrity, a very good coach, a very good man. His experience in all facets of basketball as a coach, player development, on the offensive side of the ball, defense side of the ball, in the front office, gives him a unique perspective that I think is well suited for our franchise and for our players. He's well respected amongst his peers, amongst the players, and we know as we move forward that mix of character, those traits will guide us well. So with that, I want to thank Monty, his wife Lisa, and their family for accepting us as a family and becoming a part of the Phoenix Suns organization. And with that, I'll turn it over to our next head coach, Monty Williams.
This is going to be in 3 main segments. We're going to start with a brief look at the past, sort of a comparison between what things were like before Monty and what they are now. We're going to do some present, obviously. A lot of focus on the present. We want to talk about this team, obviously.
Yes.
They're 56-14. We're not going to talk about the bad teams very much. And then, obviously, after Did You Know, we're going to go to the future. So not really talking about after the playoffs. This team has a lot of work to do in the next few months. We're going to focus on those few months, David.
Yeah, I thought we were going 2 hours on Igor versus Monty here, Max. Is that not the case?
If you want to take the Igor side, I'd love to just destroy you for 2 hours. That's what you want.
No, we are talking Monty solely for this podcast, but we have cheated a little bit and kind of looking, I guess, through his glasses at this current season because, we don't get to do this enough, so it would be remiss of us to not touch on the current team through his eyes, Max.
100%. So I'm going to start on this one. You asked me before we started, or before we were planning this, to focus on like one major thing that Monty changed from previous seasons.
Yep.
Obviously, there were like 400 million things, like everything basically changed. But the thing that stuck out to me the most when I was thinking about it was the rotations. As you know, as somebody who's done podcasts with me quite a bit, especially when we were bad,
Yep.
I complain about rotations maybe more than anything I do on Twitter. I'm obsessed with it. It makes me so angry when I think coaches are playing the wrong guys. You got the Isaiah Cannons of time past, the Jamal Crawfords, all those guys.
Yep.
Monty Williams has a few of those, very, very few. The Elfrid Payton maybe a little too much this season, but overall, it's really just not a problem with him. And that maybe the biggest compliment I can possibly give him is that I love his rotations almost all the time. And I can already hear the pushback. He's saying, well, yeah, he has good players, so it's a little easier, and that's true. But it started before this. I remember this. It was his first season. There was a Spurs game where we were down by like 1 million points, and he goes to a Booker, Mikal, Oubre, Cam Johnson, Ayton lineup, which was a lineup that at the time we were all clamoring for just to see what it looked like, and he went to it.
Yep.
Sort of out of nowhere, and we almost won the game. We had made a huge comeback with it. It was really awesome, and that was the first time I was like, this guy is not what we've had in the past. This is a different, forward-thinking, sort of modern NBA coach who actually understands like what lineups might work. Mm-hmm. And since then, it's been the same. I had almost no complaints with it, and to me, that's what sticks out most between him and what we've seen.
I think it's a really good point. I really like that you've touched on that because it will definitely flow into something that we'll talk about a little bit later with questions on the rotation, just as a bit of a tease for everyone who's going to hang around with us for the next little while. But yeah, I think we've always noted that he likes to try stuff, and we like that he likes to try stuff. I think one thing with Monty is he definitely likes to see stuff, good or bad. And, we don't necessarily agree with all of his rotations all the time, but that's what the regular season's for. Throw guys out there,
Totally.
Just last night, I was watching the Houston game and thought, God, DeAndre Ayton and Bismack, while they're out here, the offense looks absolutely horrible. And
David, I'm not going to lie. I knew I had this point coming on this podcast. I was a little nervous when that was happening. I was like, I still want to make this point.
Lo and behold, I went and looked it up, and they had a 70 offensive rating and 126 defensive rating for a net negative 50 something. And yeah, the eye test and the numbers matched up on that one. But you've got to try things, and I think we like the fact that he tries things and throws out some of those lineups that, we were clamoring for at times. I'm glad that you, I guess, mentioned the fact that having good players gives him the ability to do that, because, that is part and parcel of the job as well. But yeah, I think overall he tends to nail these things, and we see a lot of fans on Twitter complaining about, as you said, Peyton playing too much, etc., etc. But they've really only been in moments where he doesn't really have another choice. Someone's got to play, and he can't play his starters 48 minutes each, even though he maybe plays some of his starters a little bit too long at times as well. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Not sure if you had anything else to touch on with that.
Yeah, just one more thing related to it, and because you're absolutely right that he tries a lot of different things, and I think that's great. I'm glad he does that, because the other important, contra positive, that's not the right word, I don't think, but the corresponding thing he has with that is he also diagnoses the problems very quickly.
Yes.
He doesn't stick with crap that doesn't work very long. Some coaches in the NBA, trust me, you can look at other teams' Twitters. They complain. Oh, no, just look at my Twitter page from 2016 or 2017. These coaches will stick with something that doesn't work for entire seasons. And it's so frustrating. I think Monty, at least, he's not playing Alfred Payton anymore.
Yep.
Right? At all.
Yep.
He has a better option now. He knows that. And even some of the things that I thought didn't work, like Kaminsky, started to work because he saw something that obviously I didn't see, because he's better at this than I am. I think he's just better at diagnosing these things, and we should be patient with him when he's trying things, because he's going. If it doesn't work, obviously, he's not going to keep doing it.
Yeah, he likes to see, but then he's got a pretty quick trigger when he does see it. I definitely agree with you on that. So yeah, it's not like we have to hang around and watch those things for too long, and I think that kind of ties in with this, overall theme here that we'll probably get into quite a lot with culture. He gives guys a shot, and I'm sure as a rotation player, end of the bench guy, all you can really ask for is honesty from your coach and a shot to prove what you can do. And I don't think any of the guys on this roster can argue that they haven't been given an opportunity when it's arose from Monty to have a go. And that would be another negative of some other head coaches, is they just leave guys glued to the end of the bench and don't give them a shot. I think pretty much everyone 1 through 15 on this roster has at least had an opportunity to show what they've got this season. So no complaints there, I don't think.
Yep, could not agree more. We'll get into it later. That's probably the best thing about him as a coach, is the way he interacts with his players. But before we do that, David, you went back and spent a little time looking at kind of what things were like when we hired Monty Williams. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got a few things on the past. Hopefully we won't dwell on it too much, but it is kind of fascinating to touch on a few of these things. Another quick game for you, Max. The Suns have won 155 games, including playoffs, in the Monty Williams era as of recording. How far back do you think we need to go to add up to that many Suns wins prior to Monty Williams, Max?
God. Wow, 155. I would say 2012?
Ooh, just a little too long. In the 2013-14 season, the Suns won 48 games. So, add that to seasons 14-15, 15-16, 16-17, 17-18, and you get, Max, exactly the 155 wins. So then, of course, you add that to the 19-win last season before Monty in 18-19, and somewhere in that 2013-14 season is where you will get the exact number of 155. So we've been waiting a long time for this positive stretch, but as you mentioned, I went back. Fun fact for you, episode 45 of the 7 Seconds or Less podcast was when we talked about Monty. Now, Max, we did 78 episodes on that main feed before we moved over and have done another 11 on the Substack newsletter for the 4 Point Play. So that means we're at episode 90, meaning we've gone full circle here. We are exactly halfway through podcasting together. And that halfway point at episode 45 was when we talked about Monty, and now episode 90, we've coincidentally decided to talk about Monty again. I thought that was pretty cool.
That surprised me. I really would have thought it would have been later in our run there. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I went back. We both made points. I think we kind of agreed in general. I think we hit on a lot of things. I think we were wrong on a couple of things too. So I thought we'd just quickly run over on that. I think the main thing we agreed on at the time was, whilst we had some concerns about Monty, that a lot of time had passed since he was in New Orleans, and we needed to give him some time to show us kind of what he had changed. So, we said he was a leader. I think big tick there. We said he'd set a culture. Huge tick there. Moves quick, was something that we looked at just from the Suns' point of view. They got their guy. We discussed the episode before how bad it was they treated Igor, but then we kind of discussed at the start of this episode, they got their guy. They clearly did that for a reason. I think that was pretty plain to see. Yep. I kind of noted that it seemed like the franchise was finally aligned for once, kind of top through bottom, and I think that stuck around. Right coach for right now. I think a big tick on that.
Yep.
We said he'd probably be pick and roll heavy, which I think is pretty clear. More straightforward offense than what we'd seen from Igor, and really emphasize defense, which we'll get to in a second as well. But here's what we were wrong on, I think, Max.
Okay.
We said he wasn't the best X's and O's guy.
Yeah, big time wrong.
And here's the one. There were a lot of Mark Jackson references and calling Monty our bridge coach. And I think we were extremely wrong on that.
Yeah, I remember that very, very clearly. And that's absolutely, we could not have been more wrong about that. To be fair to us, everyone was saying that.
Yep.
A big part of it is Monty Williams just got a hell of a lot better as a coach. But, hey, eggs on our face. Monty wins that one.
And the last thing that we touched on briefly, and I also went on the Locked On Suns podcast around that time and touched on this as well. In New Orleans, he had 4 values to the way that they played. I've never seen them specifically referenced on the Suns, but this is pretty fascinating, Max. Number 1 was what I mentioned before, defense. We went from 29th to 17th to 6th to 2nd currently this year. Defense. Rebounding was the next value. I looked at defensive rebounds because I think that's the best kind of, effort rebounding.
It's also probably what he was talking about.
Exactly. We went from last in the league before he was here to 21st to 18th to 3rd this year in defensive rebounding.
Wow.
Run with purpose was the 3rd. I think that's a tricky one to find a stat for, but I went with, I guess, pace. Even though it kind of goes up and down a little bit here. I think it's interesting. We went from 12th, which, obviously shows that pace doesn't always mean good because we were horrible and we were the 12th quickest team in the league. 9th in the Rubio year, took a step back to 24th in the first Chris Paul year, and now we're back to 9th again. I thought that was really interesting that we've kind of gone back to the Ricky Rubio pace now, but with Chris Paul leading the charge, and that's run with purpose, I would have thought. And then the last one, value the ball. I went with assist to turnover ratio, 28th in the Igor year, 6th Monty's first last year, and we're 2nd this year.
You say 6th?
6th, yeah.
So that's before Chris Paul was 6th.
Before, yeah. Ricky Rubio's year was very underrated from a protecting the ball and sharing the ball standpoint. So really interesting, I thought, there, just as a look back on what we thought we were getting from Monty and what has eventually happened under him. But last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of that main change, and I'm cheating a little bit here, but because I've been thinking and wanting to talk about this topic for quite a while. DeAndre Ayton's case study in development, I think, is one of the more unique, interesting discussions to have. And I could go hours. We won't go. We'll just go minutes here. But I think, like I said before, culture gets thrown around a lot, and I think it gets thrown around without a real explanation of what you mean. And I think DeAndre Ayton and the way he's developed and that story is probably the single best example I can think of the impact that Monty Williams has had on this franchise. When you think about it, season 1, he was the number 1 pick. That's the season they didn't have a point guard. he had that affinity with playing power forward in college. He really shied away from the NBA big man things that we needed him to do. Very tough year on a really bad team. But if you look at his kind of shot profile, he was allowed to kind of do whatever he wanted. And then season 2, Ricky Rubio comes. They let him be a bit more free, play a little bit freer with Rubio, but really started to emphasize defense. It was the most shots he took in his career in that season 2. So they were really still letting him go. Then Chris Paul comes. They scale it right back. This for a number 1 pick, who wants to, I guess, achieve more on the offensive end. They restrict him pretty much to the paint, like we discussed wanting them to do for so long, take out those mid-range jumpers, etc. And he really started to master some of those big man skills last year, I thought. And then, of course, we get to this year, which we're going to talk about more. But before that, they go on that playoff run. He doesn't get paid in the offseason. And this year, the focus is still there. So, I think others deserve credit. Chris Paul gets a lot of it. Ayton deserves a lot of it himself. But, I'm not sure that happens without a coach like Monty Williams leading the charge, Max.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say that I'm quite sure it doesn't happen without Monty Williams at the helm. I think that's, and again, I alluded to this just a little bit earlier, I think that the key thing about Monty Williams and why he's been so successful is that he has complete and total buy-in from literally everybody in the organization. And that goes down to every single player. And you did a good job outlining. There's a lot of reasons why DeAndre Ayton would not be bought in to the situation.
Yeah.
The biggest one being that he didn't get paid, but also that he's not had. You said early on, and you were right that early on he had a little bit more of a number 1 pick sort of I guess license.
Yep.
But even early on, he still was playing with Devin Booker, and he still was. Rubio had the ball in his hands. He's a center. He didn't. He wasn't taking 30 shots a night ever, right? So he was never really quiet. Even Josh Jackson was doing more, in his time than DeAndre Ayton got a chance to do. But I think that, when Monty got here, and I think you were right to focus on this, like the entire kind of emphasis of what he was supposed to do changed. And I think that part of that is just because Monty instilled an entire culture where everyone was going to play defense, right? It wasn't just, hey, you're our center, you play defense. Booker's not going to do shit on defense, but you need to play defense. Our guards are going to do whatever the hell they want. Right, I think a big part of it was the ability to say to DeAndre, "Hey, everyone here is playing defense. Everyone here is going all out for rebounds, and you're the most important one. That you're the linchpin of that. So we need you. Like, if you don't do it, you're failing the rest of these guys who are doing it." And I think he can credibly say that because he is forcing everybody else to do it. And I think that is probably a big part of what culture is. Right, culture is accountability for everybody.
100%. I love those points from you, and that kind of, I guess, is why it's not just Monty's credit. The whole team building, James Jones deserves some credit. They really created an environment to scale DeAndre back and almost rebuild him again from scratch. And the results, as I said, I think it's really fascinating and really, really unique for a number 1 pick. I don't think that there's too many that would have gone on the trajectory so far in their development as DeAndre Ayton. I think Monty deserves a hell of a lot of credit, Max.
Well, here's what I would say, and certain people listening who are Aytonites might get furious with me for saying this, but before the playoffs started last year, DeAndre Ayton wasn't a very good player.
Yep.
He was kind of average. He was good on some nights. He was terrible on other nights.
Yep.
Averaged out to average. The playoffs, he was unbelievable, and he has mostly carried that over. He's been pretty close to that most of the season. And that is a leap. It's sort of like a weird leap because it didn't happen gradually. It happened all at once when the playoffs started last year. And then carried over. But that's a huge leap. He went from being like I said, an average player to a borderline all-star. And because it's not loud on the box score, he doesn't quite get the accolades for it. Although he has some all-star buzz this year, which is great. I'm glad that happened.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I think that it's not 100% Monty, obviously, but I think it's he was a necessary, not sufficient cause. It wasn't all him. But it was necessary. It could not have happened without what he did to come here and instill the culture that allowed Ayton to grow.
Yeah, and as a bit of a, I guess, retrospective episode that this is, we said all along it was never about the numbers with DeAndre Ayton, and I think that, has been encapsulated in the last season of play.
Well, aren't his blocks at a career low right now?
Yep, and a lot of his stats have weird kind of trends to them for sure, but he's, if you're not watching, you don't see it, I suppose.
Well, I know a lot of people don't like advanced stats. I have my questions with them, but advanced stats-wise, he is by far the best he's ever been this season. And I think that might be
Well,
telling.
we love advanced stats then, in that
I know,
case.
right? Now they're the best. All right, well, so we're kind of into the present now, so we can keep going with this, I suppose.
Let's do it.
Like this was therapeutic for me to be around a group like this. I got to tell you guys, man, I love you. I do. I don't care what happens tonight. I know what I got in this room. And it has been cool for me to be with y'all every day, to watch you guys work and battle and gain the respect of your peers the way you have on this trip. We're not the Suns of old. You've been through a lot. You've been through a lot. And it's hard to play the way you play every single night and not get the respect that you deserve. Guess what? You got it. Okay? So I don't care what happens. God knows I hope we get a chance to keep shocking the world, because that's what you did. Nobody believed we come here and go 8-0 and beat the teams we beat. But just know, man, this is special. Okay? I want you guys to know that. I don't care what happens, right? This is special. Don't let anybody take this away from you. You gain the respect of the league. Okay? Now we got to build on it. We may get to build on it this weekend, or it may happen in the summer. We don't control it. Okay? We got to get to the point where we control it. Understand that? You guys understand that? You want to be the kind of team that controls your own destiny. Okay? That's our next step. All right? Love you guys. Bring it in. Family on 3. 1, 2, 3.
So, I don't want to highlight a specific player, I guess, but I just want to kind of talk about like the system he's installed offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And the stat that really got my juices flowing on this is maybe my favorite stat of the whole season that I saw. You might know what I'm talking about already, but it's the one that StatMuse tweeted last night. That since the All-Star break, so without Chris Paul, the Suns have the most assists in the NBA.
Yep.
And that is just, it's really incredible the extent to which Monty has been able to get every single player on the Phoenix Suns to buy into an entirely unselfish style of play. I think he called it 0.5 seconds last year.
Yep.
I don't know if that nomenclature is still being used, but it's still sort of the philosophy that's going on. And I think because of that system, it allows players who, in other situations struggle to excel. Like, Aaron Holiday, listen, you can go to my tweet when I was kind of meh on us trading for him. It's because he was bad before.
Yep.
But he's good now because you get into the system and all of a sudden it starts to work. Opportunities open up for you. Like Torrey Craig had one of the best games I've ever seen from a role player in my life last night. Torrey Craig is not a special offensive player, but
and has looked very bad prior to last night. Man.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And then the other one I had written down is JaVale McGee. JaVale McGee couldn't even play last year for other teams.
Yep.
And with us, and everyone thought it was just Chris Paul, but he's been fine. He had a little bit of a lag after COVID, but he's been awesome. He was amazing last night. He's been very good recently. I think. And the other early on, Campaign's the best example of this probably. Campaign couldn't even in the league until getting to Monty's team. And I think that's such a credit to him and his staff. And I know Willie Green was a big part of it. Willie Green's not here anymore.
Yeah.
So I think Monty has carried that over, and I think that players are just they buy into what Monty's saying about the unselfishness, and obviously the success helps, and the fact that his main players are willing to buy into it. But it's such a credit to him, I think, that guys like Aaron Holiday can just come here out of nowhere and become 3 times better players.
100%. And, I've been harping on about Campaign and thinking that I've probably done him a little bit of a disservice in the past, given the spark plug role that he has to play off the bench, in terms of wondering whether he could be, more of a facilitator. I think, the stats are somewhere along the lines of, 9 assists to, 2.5 turnovers when he's been asked to start for the Phoenix Suns, either in this little stretch or those playoff games or the one game that Chris Paul rested last year. I think every time that he's been able to come in, and that just speaks to, I guess, the different role, as I said, that he's asked to play when he comes off the bench behind Chris Paul versus when he comes in. And I think that's the system as well. This has been a pretty steady progression, like the defense. They were 28th in offense under Igor, 12th the first Monty year, 7th last year, and now they're looking 3rd in offensive rating in the NBA. It's such a balanced attack as well. I pretty much dedicate the newsletter to the offense, after throwing in some defense and off-season and salary cap stuff every now and then, but most of my stuff is on offense. Most recently the focus has been DeAndre, Mikhail, Cam Johnson, all the leaps that they're kind of making on offense, which I think, I want to write about this at some point. I think it's probably one of the more balanced attacks in the NBA going into the playoffs. So that's going to be really interesting to watch.
Definitely.
Things they run like elbow, 2-up, double drag, all my kind of favorite stuff. But, one thing that I found interesting, and again, looking back at what we thought we were getting from Monty, they're 25th in ISOs, 24th in post-up frequency, 8th in elbow touches, 8th in pick and roll frequency, 6th in, off-screen offense. So again, like we thought we were going to get this really old school coach in Monty and hope that he'd changed. And I think he's shown that he has, and we're 93rd percentile in transition, 83rd in pick and roll, 80% off cuts, 83% off spot ups. Like he literally runs the definition of a modern NBA offense, which was the number one thing we were kind of scared about. We knew the culture stuff was coming. We just weren't sure about the on-court stuff. And he's kind of nailed it, and it's been that progression that we've talked about. Another thing, as you said, while Chris Paul's been out sharing the ball, that stat about them having more assists is crazy. And it's because guys like Crowder, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, they all have ridiculous assist to turnover ratios. They protect the ball so well. He does a good job of putting it in the right guy's hands. I know people would love, more DeAndre Ayton touches, but it's kind of been shown, at least to date, that he turns the ball over and doesn't pass as well as some of the other guys that aren't point guards. So why would you run more offense through them? Again, like we talked about before, like he'll try things, he'll want to see them, but he pulls away from them and goes back to his bread and butter pretty quickly. So, I'm always keen, covering this stuff to know what others think. And I don't think I've ever really asked you, what's your favorite thing that the Suns do on offense that is kind of a Monty Williams thing, Max?
Damn, that's a really good question. Also, you just said, it's like 7 things I want to respond to what you just said. There's so many good things in there.
Well, just go to that.
Okay, so I'm trying to, one of my, for real I wanted to talk about was just how much our young players have gotten better in him offensively. Like, Mikal and Cam are the two I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Because you're right about that. Especially this season. Underratedly, Mikal and Cam have, Cam's a little more, people understand that's happening. But especially lately, Mikal Bridges, the stuff he's doing on offense is really exciting. Like, the freedom I think that also Monty gives him. I think that's probably a big point maybe for what Monty does. He gives his players a lot of freedom.
Love it.
To figure things out.
Yep.
For sure. Especially Mikal. I think what Mikal's doing now in the mid-range is, absurdly exciting. I mean, I haven't looked at the stats. I guarantee they have to back up that this is true. That his frequency of kind of driving to the lane and taking 10 to 18 footers has to have rocketed in the second half of the season so far. It's
100%.
And it's becoming such a deadly play too. It goes in all the time, and it's almost like, man, you're really going to add that to what Chris Paul and Devin Booker are doing from mid range. I don't know. I think that is, to me, such a huge sign for him, because I think a lot of coaches get nervous when players who aren't their best players are taking too many kind of shots like that most players don't do in the NBA. Most players don't dribble into the lane and take the fadeaway mid-range shots.
Yeah.
But he let Shea Crowder do it, which is not good.
Put the floaties on.
But in the regular season, I'm cool with it because I think it fits into the culture. Playoffs, Jay, please stop. But yeah, I think that's kind of what stuck out to me on that.
Top 5 in the NBA. I don't know if you saw when I tweeted this, Max. Mikal Bridges top 5 in the NBA in non-restricted area paint percentage at 57.6%. The Suns actually have 4 players: DeAndre Ayton, JaVale McGee, Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, and the 5th is Nikola Jokic. So they make up 4 of the top 5 in that kind of weird spot in the paint that, isn't modern NBA, not the rim, not the 3-point line, that kind of, weird 10 to 18 foot range as you spoke about.
Oh, wait, hold on. You mean the one you're forced to use in the playoffs?
Exactly. And that's a great point again when we bring it back to Monty. He mixes this kind of playing the modern way, but also adapting to your personnel and learning how to play playoffs. That's one thing we didn't mention in the past section. We kind of talked about it. He finished at New Orleans, but then he went on to kind of a front office role in San Antonio, was on those early Philly playoff teams. I think even a time in OKC, which is where Kevin Durant kind of, took a shining to him, and Team USA. So he's kind of picked up all these little things along the way, and he's come back just a completely different coach. And
Completely.
I'm really glad you touched on Mikal, because I think if you just look at the statistics, like he's 13.8 points compared to 13.5 last year. His field goal's actually down. His 3-point percentage is down. But the shot profile, particularly in this latter stage of the season, is definitely more varied. So, that's one time when you can't just look at the numbers, and you've kind of got to watch what he's doing. He's been very, very impressive. And I love your point about giving the freedom. He even had a quote just the other day about still learning as a coach and realizing that you've got to give reps to DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, because then when you ask them to do something in the playoffs, they've done it numerous times, and it's not kind of a shock to their system when the lights are the brightest. So I thought that was a really good quote from Monty last. But I guess to round out the offense, one change this year I've noticed that I touch on quite a bit is the empty corner stuff that they do. That early offense, and I think I've touched on it with you last time we spoke. I think it's a direct response to that ball pressure that they got against Milwaukee in the finals. They're getting into their offense early. They're throwing a screen high up on the side out of the corner. It'll either be a big like DeAndre or JaVale that, screens for a guard, and then you've kind of got that easy lane to the bucket on a non-congested side, and 3 shooters out on the other side to find, and that's really hard to guard. Or even recently, it can be a wing. It can be Mikal or Shamet or someone who comes up and then slips the screen, and then the big comes in and sets a second screen, and that becomes even harder to guard. They get a lot of penetration out of that for a team that kind of struggles to penetrate otherwise. So I think that's been a really interesting change. And the slip screens from Mikal and Jay Crowder are just so dangerous. It makes them, really unpredictable to guard. So that's been my favorite change this year. My favorite overall is the Spain pick and roll, which I've covered many, many times. And just to round out the offense and this kind of look back on Monty, Half Court Hoops is a follow on Twitter, does a lot of X's and O's stuff. He did, probably last year, I think it was, a feature on the Suns Spain pick and roll. And in that, he actually wrote, it's called the Spain pick and roll after the Spain national team, right? I'm sure you and most people listening know that.
Yes.
He actually wrote that he worked out that prior to when it was named the Spain pick and roll in around 2015, Monty Williams was running this play with Anthony Davis and Ryan Anderson, but because it wasn't with a guard, which is what the Spain pick and roll is more, people listening will probably remember, Devin Booker setting the back screen, Landry Shamet, Cam Johnson even, kind of a guard. But he was running it with 2 bigs, which is why it was kind of not brought into the conversation around that time. So again, my mind blew, Max. We thought Monty New Orleans was this very rigid, non-modern, and now I'm not sure if there's, a single play that is talked about more in modern day offenses than the Spain pick and roll. Yeah. And Monty was running it, 10 years ago.
That's actually fascinating. It's almost like maybe he just didn't have the right team, Yep. And it's possible because, Anthony Davis back then wasn't exactly the easiest guy to be around, and maybe it's, I don't know. That's really interesting. Maybe Monty didn't have a fair shake last time. I don't know, but I'll tell you this: he's really, really damn good now. The one thing I want to talk about on defense real quick is Devin Booker. And I know Devin Booker is very self-motivated. I'm sure he would have become an okay defender, eventually probably anyway. But the fact that he got, the light just clicked for Booker, instantly. He became a good defender kind of overnight. There wasn't much of, a gradual progression.
Yep.
He's one day Devin Booker's bad at defense. The next day he's good now. And I think a lot of that has to be attributed to Monty Williams and just kind of the standard of defensive accountability he started to hold everybody to.
Yep.
And also to get him to buy in, especially because remember, it's easy to forget this now because of how well things have gone since. But the Chris Paul era didn't start off particularly amazingly. We were 8-8.
8-8.
Things weren't going very well. Booker was terrible. He was not fitting in. But the one thing he was doing from the very start of that season was playing defense, even when he couldn't make a shot. And I think that is a testament to Monty Williams to keep him bought in, because a lot of players would be like, screw this, I'm just going to go score some points when they're not playing well and the team's not playing well either. And I think that the fact that he was able to get him, particularly through that, playing defense the entire time, and to get to the point where now it's like, I don't know, man, Devin Booker, he's not the best defensive guard in the NBA. He's not probably top 5, but he's like getting in the top 10, 15 range. He's really good on defense now. And I think that go ahead.
No, keep going, please.
No, I was going to finish the same thing, basically. I think that the fact that he's gotten to that point so quickly is a testament to Monty Williams.
I'm so glad you've brought this up, because I was going to bring it up earlier. It gives me a great chance to bring it back in. Let's go back to those 4 values of Monty Williams.
Yes.
Because Devin Booker, I wanted to look at him because there's so much roster turnover, right? It was really hard to kind of go, all right, well, what player changed from Igor to Monty Williams, for instance? Devin Booker's basically the only player still on the roster. DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges were in their rookie seasons. So like you said before, with Booker's defense, pretty easy to argue that they've just gotten better, and it's not because of the coach specifically. When you look at Devin Booker's basketball reference page from a just normal box score stats perspective, he's been incredibly consistent for about 4 or 5 years now. Same points per game. Efficiency in certain areas goes up and down. Same box score stats, mainly across the board, I should say. But let's look at those 4 values and dig into it a little bit more. We'll go in reverse order. Value the ball, number 4. Devin Booker's got his best assist-to-turnover ratio this season by far in any season that he's had. Third value, run with purpose. We see Devin Booker run the lanes this season, run on fast breaks this season, run with the ball this season, so much better than he ever has in his career. He's been, I wouldn't say lazy, but he's generally held back waiting for the ball to come to him. How many times do we see him just sprint to the corner and space out the defense?
Constantly.
He either gets a bucket or the team gets a bucket. He sacrifices on that, so much for this current team. Rebound. Would you say Devin Booker this season is a much better rebounder than he has been in the past, Max?
Absolutely.
Yep. And the numbers don't really say it, and that's, minutes, situation, etc.
Important rebounds.
Key rebounds. Yep. He gets key rebounds. And then the last thing you were touching on, which is the perfect end, defense. We still haven't found a metric or a stat or something that perfectly kind of can encapsulate how good someone is on defense or how much they've improved. But he is such a better defender than he was when Monty Williams came in. Yes, you could say, well, now they're winning. Now they've got better personnel around them. It's probably a little bit of everything. But if Monty doesn't come in as a guy who puts emphasis on defense first and everything else after that, I don't think he makes the leap that he's made on that end.
100%. He's like a defensive playmaker now.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody who wants to say he's not a better defensive player than he was before, he's so much better. Like,
how's his steals while Chris Paul has been out? Like, he's averaging
so high.
Almost, it's ridiculous.
The one he had, I think it was the Pelicans game where he anticipated a pass and jumped across the court and stole. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I think it was that third quarter, maybe.
Yep.
That was an incredible steal. He just makes plays like that now. He's applying his uncanny court vision and his ability to just kind of read the game to defense now, and it's really exciting. And I know this is a Monty Williams podcast, but just brief sidebar on him also offensively since Chris Paul has been out. Oh my God, he is so freaking good right now.
It's just so much fun to watch. It's like, again, if this is a retrospective podcast, thinking back to all those times we discussed what he might look like as a point guard, point book situation. We always said you'd probably put him out there with a pseudo point guard at least, but just the ball in his hands more. He, I think I was looking at it the other day. He's basically averaging 4 more assists while only turning the ball over at 3/4 of a turnover more than what he was when Chris Paul was around. It's just an astronomical leap that he's made while Chris Paul's been out.
He looks incredibly good. It's a good reminder of how much he's sacrificing to make this team work. Because playing with Chris Paul is not good for your stats. It's just not. But Booker obviously does not care at all. That dude only cares about winning. It's amazing.
Yep. He said it all along during those bad losing streaks, and now it's proof. He really doesn't care. He just cares about winning.
Nope. And let's give him some credit with Monty together. The thing a coach needs more than anything else is his best player buying in.
Yep.
And those things are happening. I have one more important thing about current Monty to discuss before Did You Know. Do you have anything else?
Just a couple of things on defense,
Okay.
like we did with Mikhail and talking about stats.
Okay.
I just want to highlight Jay Crowder. Like, the stats don't really kind of bear it out with him, although, 1.4 steals a game is actually second best of his entire career this season, so I thought that was really interesting. But he's a great communicator. He's just always in the right spot. He's second in the NBA for DRPM by ESPN, whether you want to put any weight into that or not, but I thought that was really interesting. He's always in the Suns' best lineups. One thing that he's kind of crucial to that, like the empty corner stuff in offense I talked about, one change I've noticed this year. When I say change, guys, as well, they might have been doing this last year and I just didn't pick up on it, so it's a change to me, so don't come at me too much, but the off-ball switching that they do, I think everyone thinks about switching, on-ball scenarios with a screen and the two players switch and take different opponents. The Suns do this thing, particularly with Chris Paul, because they want to keep him as a low man or one of the bigs as a low man. They do all this off-ball scram switching, and Booker, who we mentioned, and Crowder are probably the two best guys at seeing that coming, seeing the offense trying to target either Chris Paul or a big in a high pick and roll and switching off. And it's just a complete play killer. Like the play's been called by the coach or the point guard, and you throw this completely different look at them than they were expecting. And it takes like 5-10 seconds off the shot clock. And I just think that is something that I've really noticed this year. And then the last thing that I would talk about is just one specific play that I highlighted on Twitter against the Pelicans the other day, which just encapsulates everything from this team on defense that I love. The play that I'm talking about, and you can go and find it, but high pick and roll from the Pelicans. First campaign helps at the nail, so around the free throw line. Just something that the Suns do in every pick and roll. Throw three guys at two, and you can kind of stifle them a little bit. Then Crowder pre-rotates. That's something that Draymond Green gets a lot of credit for. And again, Crowder, he sees the play coming, and instead of rotating as it's happening, he's already there, kind of showing you that he's there as you get there. Booker, again, we're mentioning all these same guys again, digs down on the big and kind of takes Crowder's man while he's rotated into the paint. Payne helps the helper, and then Book, is what they call X's out from helping on Jay Crowder's man. Payne goes over to Booker's man, so then Booker realizes and takes Payne's man and stops the shot from the outside. And then Bridges denies the ball. And, his ball denial, or the way he breaks up dribble handoffs and gets steals for fast break dunks, is probably one of my favorite things that he does. So I just thought that was really a play that, all the little things that the Suns do on defense were all highlighted in one single play there, and I just loved it.
I love the breakdown. That's great. It made me think of something. I wanted to ask you about this. The best quarter of the entire Suns season so far to me, especially defensively, but I think overall, was the third quarter against Miami about 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
They were just suffocating absolutely everybody. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure you probably watched that now like 17 times, knowing you. But that one quarter, if you want to see if you didn't watch the game for whatever reason, I recommend going back and watching the third quarter against the Miami Heat, because that quarter was about the best I've ever seen the Phoenix Suns play defense in my life.
The defense was incredible. Monty made a point of touching on it after the game and said it was some of the best defense he'd seen from the Phoenix Suns throughout his tenure, and some of the best defense he'd just seen in general, I believe he said. So yeah, you're not making that up at all. It was stifling. And you have a habit of doing this, Max, a great segue, because we were going to, before Did You Know, just touch on a little thing each that we love about Monty Williams. I know you've got one in the pocket, so I'll go to mine, because it is that game. And it's bringing Booker back for offensive possessions, and as a little subplot, bringing Mikal Bridges back for defensive possessions is one of these things that I love. But we'll focus on Booker and offense and that game, seeing as though you brought it up. Book plays, I believe, until the 1 minute 57 second mark of that third quarter that you're referencing. On the back of that defense, it's 86-72. So the Suns have got that gap from the defense that they play, but the game's by no means over based on what happens in that last 2 minutes. Monty tries to get some rest for Booker and brings in Torrey Craig. At 36 seconds left in the quarter, so a minute and a half later, the score is 86-74. The Suns haven't scored at all, and Miami's only scored one bucket. Monty sees a chance to bring Booker back in for the last possession. He brings him in. Mikal Bridges actually gets a 2, and then with 2 seconds left, Devin Booker nails a 3, and all of a sudden at three-quarter time, the score is 91-74, and that game is all but over. And I've always loved this about Monty, but that game in particular, I thought about it, and when I was thinking about little things that he does, the fact that he has that flexibility, like you touched on with his rotations, to go on the fly sometimes with his key, I guess, offensive and defensive playmakers. I just love that about him, Max.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, you and I talked about that when it happened.
Yep.
We DM'd about that Booker put him back in. That was a brilliant move, and something that I think that coaches should do more often. Some of that quick subbing in and out, avoiding the fouls, but getting your players in for crucial, especially end of quarter possessions. I think it's important.
What's your little thing?
All right,
give it to me.
Yeah, so my little thing is, it's not a little thing. I mean, it's gonna be a little, we're gonna do it quickly, but it's definitely not a little thing in terms of how much it matters. There is not a coach in the NBA, in my opinion, who is better at protecting his players in the media than Monty Williams is.
Ooh, I love that.
Or even protecting his organization as well. He also protects his organization very well. He protects everything very well. You couldn't ask for a better ambassador. Every single person in the world likes him. I don't think I've never heard of anybody insult Monty Williams. I don't know if you have. Never seen that in my life.
I think that would be a death wish if you tried that.
Right? I think so too. And the thing too is, I don't think it's just that. I mean, obviously that's a huge part of it, and it's what makes him Monty. But I think he's also just really good at finding the right thing to say about difficult circumstances, or any circumstance really. I think a lot of it probably stems from his unfortunate life experience. It's given him a lot of perspective. It's made him probably just a better person in general, better evaluator of what's going on around him. But all I know is it's an incredibly valuable trait to have as an NBA head coach. The X's and O's matter a lot. But I think what matters a lot more is Phil Jackson and Pat Riley and others have proven is it's kind of managing personalities. And I can't think of a better person in the NBA at making sure your personalities, your team is aligned than Monty Williams.
I 100% agree. And all I would add to that is it often puts him in the firing line by doing that. And he puts himself out there, and, having a 5-year contract, you've kind of got, I guess, the security to do that. But often those quotes to take pressure off others puts pressure on himself and quite often gets him in trouble with reactions from the fan base and stuff like, what do you mean you didn't notice that until now or whatever? And I've always tried to look at his quotes with a little bit more nuance from that exact perspective of who's he trying to protect here, or who's he not wanting to throw under the bus and instead putting himself in the firing line instead. So, yeah, I think that's a great little thing that he does.
Yep, he is deeply, deeply thoughtful about what he says about other, in response to questions in press conferences. He thinks a lot about the implications of everything he says.
Very, very quick one that I'll bring up just because I think it's hilarious. Remember when we used to complain so much about last-second shots to win the game always being that Booker fadeaway in the corner early on in Monty's career?
Yes, I do.
I don't know if there's a better coach in the NBA now with kind of after timeout and baseline plays. Obviously the Valley-oop is the big one that we can look back on fondly, but he has changed astronomically from those early games, Max.
I couldn't agree. Basically every, Chris Paul's gotten the most credit for the way we performed late in games this season, in clutch games.
Yep.
Booker's gotten a lot too. They've both been amazing, but a large part of it is also that every single time we come out of a timeout with under 5 minutes, we score. Every time. I would love to see our field goal percentage on after timeouts with less than 5 minutes this season. It's got to be crazy.
Definitely.
All right, I think unless you've got anything else, it's Did You Know time.
Let's do it, Max.
Look, this is the deal. One, you're getting back in transition. You don't have Giannis find a man and be a guard. Two, look at me. You set a high level for yourself. That's why you're down. That's great. Now go reach that level, okay? And you can reach it with force. Doesn't have to be stats all the time. Go dominate the game with force, okay? Because you set a high level for yourself. Go dominate the game with force. Let's go.
Well, Max, there should be no shock at the topic for our regular segment of our now irregular podcast this time around. And with the overall pod theme in the works for a few weeks now, I won't allow any excuses for why you didn't study up on the Suns' supreme leader. So, Max, did you know that the full given name of the Phoenix Suns head coach is Tavares Montgomery Williams?
Wow.
Drafted into the NBA first as a player, the 6'8", 225-pound small forward, Monty went pick 24 in the 94 NBA draft, just one pick after the Suns chose Wesley Person at number 23. But Max, your first quiz question now. How many of the 5 NBA teams Williams played for can you name for us?
Oh, God, not very many. Knicks?
Knicks was his first team that he was drafted to. He played 2 seasons from 94 to 96. Any others?
I might be out now. Hornets?
Nah.
Yep, see, I'm out.
Let's go in order after that. San Antonio Spurs.
Okay.
He spent 3 seasons there after being traded there from the Knicks in 96. Then the Denver Nuggets, where Monty signed as a free agent in 98, but only played 1 game and 6 minutes before being waived. Orlando Magic next. Williams was the next stop there and his longest after signing as a free agent in 99. And he rounded out with the Philadelphia 76ers, the last team of his NBA career, before he was traded back to his former team in Denver and waived. But Max, let's fast forward now to the coaching career that we mentioned earlier. Began in New Orleans as a head coach after being an assistant in Portland. Monty lasted 5 seasons with the Hornets/Pelicans before returning to the assistant coaching ranks, as I mentioned before, in OKC and Philly and the front office in San Antonio. Season 1920, we were lucky enough to land him in Phoenix. And Max, it's that tenure in Phoenix I want to focus on now and perhaps direct a few difficult questions your way.
I love difficult questions.
All with this overarching hypothetical in mind. Can Monty Williams become the greatest Suns coach of all time? Max, from 69 to 2022, how many coaches would you guess the Suns have had?
15?
The answer is 20, and now I'd like you to name every single one of them.
That's a joke, right?
That is definitely a joke. I know I give you some curly ones, but I'm not going to do that to you. However, it may shock you and the listeners, but by the end of the current season, Monty will already be 6th in franchise history with 227 games coached. Max, any ideas of the 5 above him?
Mike D'Antoni?
Is one with 389.
Paul Westphal?
Is the other with 279.
Cotton Fitzsimmons?
Is the third with 549.
Alvin Gentry didn't get there, did he?
He did. I'm going to give you that. 4th.
Okay, all right.
302. Okay. And then there's one way out on his own right in front.
I should probably know it, but I don't.
John McLeod, 1,122 games coached. And with 2 seasons left on his current contract, Williams is likely to have only Cotton and McLeod ahead of him for games coached when he finishes his initial 5-year contract. But what about win percentage? Well, at 65% in the regular season, it is only bettered by who at 68.5%, Max. You did mention this guy before.
Is it the total win percentage?
Yes.
I'm going to say D'Antoni.
It was Paul Westphal.
Okay.
He'd need 51 more wins and just 14 losses to topple him at the top. As for the playoffs, Williams currently has the best win percentage of any Suns coach, and another finals run this season would catapult him to 2nd all-time for total playoff wins behind just John McLeod. And finally, there is of course the heights of which Monty and his men have already reached, with a finals appearance only matched by 2 previous coaches in the Suns' past. Monty Williams may struggle to get to the total of 1,122 games by McLeod. That would take another 11 seasons after this one, Max. But just about every other record in franchise history is on the table. I, for one, hope Monty gets a contract extension this upcoming offseason. But just in that time span of his first 5-year contract, Williams is a chance to hold the following: 3rd in games coach, 1st in win percentage, 2nd in playoff wins, most wins in a season by a Suns coach, and the furthest reached in the postseason by a Suns coach, hopefully alone with that final record and an elusive debut championship. So for our big question, All that should surely make Monty the greatest coach in Suns history. But for now, Max, let's round this bad boy out in typical fashion. Please let me illustrate to you why Monty Williams was always destined to be a great NBA coach. You may remember recently that Greg Popovich broke the record for the most wins by an NBA coach in NBA history to put him number 1 on that list. Max, I'm not going to make you try and name the rest of the top 10, but feel free to jump in if you know any of the impressive list with connections to Monty Williams, the player. First was the aforementioned Popovich, now the winningest coach in NBA history, who was Monty's coach for 2 seasons in 97 and 98. Second on the list, and who Pop just took the record from, do you know, Max?
Was that when that's after his draft,
His
right?
son was just in the news today for suing the Mavericks.
Oh, Harry Nelson.
Don Nelson, and guess what, Max? Monty played for him too, a brief stint at his first stop in New York. Another Hall of Fame coach for Williams in New York was none other than Pat Riley, who was in charge for Monty's rookie season in New York and is currently number 5 on the NBA wins list. Then there was Monty's coach in his final year in Philly, Larry Brown, 7th on the list of most wins in the NBA. And in Orlando, for 3 seasons there, Monty Williams was coached by current coach. Can you think of who that might be?
I'm not sure.
Doc Rivers rounds out the top 10 for wins in the NBA. So Max, in just 9 NBA seasons with a pretty modest NBA career, Monty Williams played for 5 of the 10 head coaches with the most wins in NBA history. The other 5, Lenny Wilkins, Jerry Sloan, George Karl, Phil Jackson, and Rick Adelman. So Max, with 300 odd wins to his name, just another 700 or so more, and Monty may find himself breaking into that top 10. But for now, I'm ready to talk about how he gets the last few on offer this regular season and the 16 most important ones in Phoenix playoff history.
Yeah, I don't think the answer to the question of whether he's the greatest Suns coach of all time will be hard if he wins the title this season.
Nope.
I think everyone will agree on the answer to that question.
We're making it hard on ourselves, okay? But we can't have our heads down. It's emotionally tough. But we got to know we put ourselves in this position. We got home court advantage. You got to keep your spirit high. That's the deal. Ever since I've been here, we talked about everything you want is on the other side of hard. This is hard. This is freaking hard. So you got to stick together. That's the deal. All right? Let's bring it in. Come on, guys.
Yeah, so let's start talking about a little bit of how he's going to get there. So I guess, do you want to do our, so we have small criticisms too. Should we do that at the end? I don't want to go into that now.
Yeah, you're the host. Switch it up.
I think what I want to do here is kind of like, what is it the biggest thing facing him in the playoffs? Like the biggest decision. Because we just talked about how he's going to prove himself to be the best coach if he gets this done.
Yep.
I want to talk about how can he get it done. I think for me the biggest one is going to be how to handle Jay Crowder and Cam Johnson, because those 2 players are both freaking amazing, and he's got to decide which one's playing to close games, and it's going to be hard sometimes.
I laugh because we always do this. I had a couple of backups just in case, because we said we'd kind of do one or two big decisions going into the postseason each. And
yeah.
I'll touch on my other ones in a minute, and I'll let you take the floor here, because I had, can he get Cam Johnson 30-plus minutes in the playoffs, Max?
He has to. Even if he has to find a way to play both those guys 30-plus minutes, Cam Johnson has to play 30-plus minutes. He's the 5th best player on the team at worst. I'll emphasize at worst. He might be the 4th best player on the team. I'm not sure. So he needs to play a lot in this postseason. He's earned that. I think he's sort of like this, kind of like our secret offensive weapon that might be the reason we win the title. So yeah, I think I could not agree more with you.
13 games as a starter, 33.6 minutes, 17.5 points, 54, 49, 92 shooting splits.
Good Lord.
47 games off the bench, 24.3 minutes, only 11.5 points, 45, 43, 85 shooting splits. It's a stark difference, stark contrast.
God, they're both so good, though.
They're both great, but I think to your point,
you're right. No,
your
you're right.
point
It's so much better
of secret offensive weapon, another 6 points off the bench, because, I'm not saying that to argue that he should start. I know that that's a topic that other people like to have. I don't think it's necessary.
Yep.
Just play him 30 minutes. The unfortunate thing, and this was going to be a small nitpick, so I may as well mention it now about Monty. As great as his rotations are, he does struggle with choice when it comes to the playoffs, I think, and I've got a couple of things to discuss on that, and this is one of them. So, by being a little bit rigid with his rotations in the playoffs, if Cam doesn't start, he hasn't yet quite worked out how to get him over that 30 minutes if he's coming off the bench, and he only played 21.1 last playoffs, which is even less than what he's playing off the bench this season. And he just needs to find a way. He needs to sit down.
So, David, I have the answer for you.
Please tell me and everyone else.
The way is that when Cam Johnson's playing well, he should close the game.
Love it.
Because he's better than Jay Crowder. And when he's playing well, he should keep playing because he's better. When Cam Johnson's on his game, he's our second best offensive player or first best in every single time. So we can't take him off the floor, right? And I think if you average out when that happens, I think they get him over 30 probably, right?
Yep. I'm in full agreement, and that's always been my argument. We don't need to talk about him starting. We need to talk about him finishing.
Yes.
And that Knicks game, his last game, is a great example of that.
Totally. He's just more dangerous than most of our players. Like, he's probably the best shooting big forward in the league now. I think it's not a crazy thing to say. And that's a really important role. And the fact he does other things too, he's a pretty good defender. And that's actually something I forgot to mention a little earlier. I think Cam Johnson plays great defense. And I know he was good in college, but he translated to the NBA immediately. And Monty had to have some hand in that, right?
Oh, he's very, very underrated. One of those guys, again, I don't think I touched on this in the defense. I think one thing that I've learned, because us Suns fans aren't really used to great defense. No. One thing that I've learned through this team is I used to think it was all about individual athleticism and good defenders to have a good defense. I think the Suns are a great example that whilst you need a couple of, key linchpins like a Mikal Bridges, a DeAndre Ayton, it's more about guys just understanding in a team defense construct where to be. And I think Cam Johnson's a perfect example of that.
I could not agree more. It's exactly the right way to put it. Even Shamet and Payton played defense on this team.
Yep.
Which is insane because Shamet's obviously not known as a defender. Albert Payton doesn't usually care in defense. Again, this is the Monty podcast, testament to Monty.
Yep.
But how about a 30-year sub for you now? Unless you want to touch a little more on the Cam J conundrum.
Yeah, so my big question that included Cam was, can Monty nail his rotations in the playoffs? So we've done the Cam portion of it, so let's go to the other portion of it. And it's a bit of a question for you. Who's the 8th and 9th man in the rotation in the playoffs? Let me set it up for you. I think there's 7 guys. Booker, Paul, Ayton, Mikal, Jay, and the 2 Cams. I tend to think personally you go down to 8 in the playoffs, but looking at last year, I think Monty might actually like 9. I think he likes options. Like I said, he struggles with choice sometimes. I think if you look at the playoffs last year, 8 guys played 20-plus games in the playoffs, and then Dario and Frank combined played 24 between them. So count all of that up, and you kind of get a 9-man rotation throughout the entire playoffs. So
yeah.
Here's the other names I didn't mention. Shamet, Holiday, Biz, JaVale, Torrey, and maybe even Frank coming back. So here's 4 opponents as we may get through, and I want you to tell me who the key 8th and maybe 9th guys are in each series, because I do think it will change.
I agree.
Clippers in the first round. Who's 8 and 9?
Torrey Craig's definitely playing in that series.
Agreed.
I think Shamet plays in that series too, at least to start.
I think it's small. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Then we get Utah in the second round. Then what happens?
Yeah, Utah is where it gets bigger for sure. And there's a possibility even Biombo plays in that series. Who knows?
Yep.
I think it definitely gets bigger in that series.
Back to Golden State in the Western Conference Finals.
Oh, and I should also say Aaron Holiday in the Utah series probably too.
Okay, like it. Yep.
Yeah, Golden State, I think Shamet has to play, and unless it doesn't work, I think you just have to try him because you need guys who shoot threes with them.
Yep.
And I think that Torrey again, because I think you just need Torrey's toughness. I think especially if Ayton is not perfect, I think Ayton will be fine in that series, but I think there's a chance you go with a big Crowder Torrey lineup a lot in a series against Golden State.
And then Monty and the Suns get back to the finals against the Milwaukee Bucks, Max.
I think almost like it's like destined for Biombo to start in that series. I feel like it's like the storybook ending.
Just to clarify that for the listeners, you said star and not start, right?
I said star, yeah, not start. No. Aiden is starting. Do not get all mad at me on Twitter. Aiden's starting. But I think for some reason I just feel like Beyond was like meant to have a finals moment. But then obviously Aaron Holiday against Drew Holiday, right? Come on, Aaron Holiday played 20 minutes a game in that series.
Just to confuse them a little bit, maybe throw him out there and confuse.
Also,
them.
brothers are just got they don't get brothers under brothers' skin. You know, it's just a good guy to have out there.
Get a little bit more in their faces than what we did last year. Might be something they can do and be a bit more aggressive. I pretty much agree across the board with you on those, so I'm not going to touch on it too much. One thing I touched on in another podcast I did with the Into the Valley guys. Last week or the week before, I wouldn't rule out the two guys in a Milwaukee series being JaVale and Biyombo.
Yes.
I think that one thing I've learnt through the last Bucks matchup is I'm not sure they got those guys as kind of insurance down the line for Ayton, then if he's in foul trouble, JaVale, and then if he's in foul trouble, Biyombo. I actually think that last game showed they're going to throw all three guys to kind of never let Giannis get in a groove with anything, because I think that's what happened in games 5 and 6. He understood the defensive coverage and worked out how to exploit it, whereas he had a really poor game in the last one. It was because they never really let him get used to anything in particular. Max.
I was breaking this down the other day. I was like, this actually isn't rocket science. Of course, that when Giannis' only issue is when he ran into Ayton. That's the only thing that happened to him in the finals last year. He ran into Ayton a few times.
Yep.
So now you just throw three guys at him who are fresh all the time because you're rotating them at Giannis. He constantly has to run into guys who are gigantic and in his way and like athletic enough to be in his way the whole time he goes to the rim, right?
Yep.
It's just a numbers game. It's so brilliant by them, by James Jones in particular, probably, to realize that like that's how you stop Giannis. Like you don't get worn down by him. You make it so the way he attacks wears him down.
Yep. I totally agree. And just never let him get comfortable with anything, I think.
Yes.
Do you have another big question decision before we go to the nitpicking at Monty?
Yeah, actually I have one more that it's different. It's a little different from what we were just talking about. It's about the rest of the regular season.
I've got a rest of regular season one. I'm excited to see if we cross over here.
Yeah, maybe it's the same thing. So mine is basically, how do you decide how much to rest guys versus how much to pursue like franchise records? Especially the winning the most games in the season.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I figured it. I mean, it's a huge question, right? It's a real. I find myself struggling with that as a fan. What do I want to root for?
And it just to, I guess, give my example before you go on with it. I use Book as the example because we know CP3's getting his forced rest now, and that's kind of a good thing. And hopefully he's back with a few games to spare to, ramp things back up before the playoffs. Book's been shouldering the load, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, in his absence. How do you rest him versus bring him back with CP3 to get their chemistry going again? And just in particular, I think if you break Book's season down into kind of 10-game chunks, struggled the first 10 after a really busy off-season, started to hit his stride the next kind of 20 games, got a hamstring injury, so then struggled again from a statistical standpoint, and then is really hitting his stride here after the All-Star break and a forced COVID break for him. And I think there's a real correlation between fresh legs and getting the best out of Devin Booker, and they've got to time that to perfection.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think I really like your point also earlier about how that you want him to get some games with Chris Paul too, and Chris Paul is most likely to come back like, if at all in the regular season, like the last couple gagame at most, right?
Exactly.
So you almost want to get some Booker some rest before that, so you can get him at least one game with Chris Paul in the regular season. I didn't even think about that part of it, but that's another huge decision for Monty. The timing on this, like you said, it's going to be really interesting. And one thing that helps them is that they have way more information than we do.
Yes.
They will know a lot more about when Chris Paul's probably going to come back, right?
Yeah.
So that'll help them plan that out. But yeah, for us, it's nearly impossible.
Did you have anything else on the rest front?
No, I think that covered it. Yeah, basically, of course, we had the exact same thing on this. It's a hard decision to make, and we're going to see how they handle it.
Shall we quickly nitpick at Monty Williams?
Yes, let's very quickly because we're running pro Monty here, but we want to do a fair full-on take on him. So I think one of them is we'll get out of the way very quickly because we talked about it a decent amount. The timeouts, I think he's late on them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Suns fans agree with me. I think this is subjective though. Maybe he's right, we're wrong. Obviously, they're doing very well, so maybe he's right on this. But It's great to me and great to some other fans.
Yeah.
Good. You have one?
Well, mine ties into that.
Okay.
Challenges.
Yeah. That's my other
It's
one.
very, very nitpicky. Very, very nitpicky. If I asked you the success rate of Monty Williams' challenges last regular season from a percentage standpoint, what would you say, Max?
God, bad. 40%?
46% he won of his challenges, which isn't great. You could say, every 1 in 2 is not bad, but when you really only have one and you should be using it for something egregious, I don't think that that's great. And this is getting really nitpicky, and it's at kind of the whole staff, not just Monty, but he's the head of it, so he takes most of the blame. The success rate itself isn't really my biggest complaint. It's more they don't seem to have quite worked out how to best kind of use this rule to their advantage. So you burn a timeout by doing it, right? And you get the timeout back if you're successful, I believe. So often either they don't use their challenge at all, and there's something in the last couple of minutes where you're kind of like, hey, Monty, you've got a challenge and you've got timeouts.
Yeah. The Bucks game, David, you can refer to that because that was absurd.
100%, and that's kind of the fresh one in my mind, but it's definitely not the only time I've seen this. This is so nitpicky and so me, and I'm sure people will get a kick out of it, but they don't challenge and then they call a timeout anyway. So it's like they don't understand that it's a free hit if you challenge. It's like the last play of the game, you're using the challenge, which is the timeout, which is the only penalty to getting the challenge wrong, and you're using it anyway. So just try your luck. I just don't get it, Max. It drives me insane.
There's a decent chance they don't know that rule, David. You should send a letter to the Suns front office.
Well, I've tweeted about it a lot in the hope that someone stumbles across it, because it's like they don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they didn't challenge that play in the Milwaukee game makes you think they're not even thinking about challenges, David. Because if you even have them in your mind at all, you're challenging that particular play. It makes no sense not to.
100%.
So, and my last very, very tiny nitpick is just entirely related to this, is that he's too much of a player's coach sometimes. He'll challenge because JaVale McGee gets mad. He did that once. He challenged for Devin Booker all the time. I think he stopped challenging when Devin Booker asked him.
Yeah, he's banned.
So that's good. He's banned. So that's good. But he did JaVale McGee earlier this season. That was pretty bad. So don't do that. And generally, sometimes he's a little too much of a player's coach, like when he plays Chris Paul 40 minutes on a back-to-back. Or has Cave Johnson get hurt with 3 minutes left. He just needs to rein that back sometimes a little bit. But overall, I'll take that versus the opposite. That's for sure. Yeah,
I love that you mentioned that last here because, I think it ties into a couple of those big decisions around resting guys and rotations and stuff as well. But I know you get driven crazy sometimes, and so does most of the Suns fan base when the starters are in and they're up 15 with 2 minutes left, and it's a fine line. I think a lot of the stuff we've been positive about today about Monty is because he is a player's coach, and the culture and the belief that he sets in guys, and it's a really fine line that sometimes he has to go too far than what we would prefer to keep guys on his side. So I agree with you. It's definitely a negative or something that needs to be improved, but we also don't fully understand, I guess, the human aspect to it and how he gets to guys to buy in because of how much of he is a player's coach. So it's a real tricky one, Max.
All I know is when I was overseas about however long ago it was when Chris Paul thing happened, and Scott Howard on Twitter texted me and said that Chris Paul was out for 6 to 8 weeks with the hand thing. My first reaction was, that's probably a blessing in disguise. The first reaction that I had, because I was like, that guy, they cannot keep him off the court, and I think that's detriment, but it's not going to affect us this season. I think we got saved from it.
And we keep mentioning, the old stint in New Orleans. It's probably a perfect kind of way to round this conversation out. Monty himself has commented that he didn't give Chris Paul enough freedom in New Orleans, and that was kind of where things went awry, and he's been so happy and glad, and Chris Paul's mentioned it as well, that they've been able to reunite. But I think two guys that competitive, particularly how competitive Booker and Chris Paul are, giving them the reins fully and not pulling them back occasionally, it definitely has its dangers. And I don't think you were the only one that was kind of happy with that forced rest for Chris, because it didn't look like they were going to do it themselves, even if they had more than enough break on the rest of the NBA to take a few games off.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Chris Paul would have played every single game since the All-Star break. We'd probably have 60 wins right now. It would have been really fun, but it would have been scary.
100%.
All right, should we get on to 7 seconds for less, David?
I cannot wait. Let's do it.
I think it's going to take me a minute, I just don't take it for granted. It's hard to get here, and I wanted it so bad, It's hard to process right now. It's hard, That's all.
Thank you, Coach.
So we both ask each other 3 questions now because we don't do this enough to do it otherwise, I think.
Yep.
We take way more than 7 seconds to answer them usually. So let's just go ahead and start. Do you want to go first or want me to go first?
You can take the honors, please.
Okay. Aside from Devin Booker and Chris Paul, which Phoenix Suns player's offense is most important to us winning a title this season?
DeAndre Ayton.
Interesting. I didn't have him. I thought it was either Mikal or Cam Johnson for just pure offense.
I'm biased because I've, covered all 3 of those guys recently, and I think there's no bad answer between. You could justify all 3 of them, I think. I just keep having flashbacks. I've watched a lot of those old playoff games because I'm a sicko. And I just think that what they've developed this year with DeAndre Ayton as a release valve is going to really come to the forefront in the playoffs, Max.
Yeah, and I will say, if you've been watching a lot of playoff games lately, Ayton was certainly that in the playoffs last year.
Yep.
So I absolutely understand where you're coming from on that. All right, give me yours.
All right, we recently touched on the 7 guys in our last question there that I ran through, and you picked different guys for different series, but if you could only pick 1/8 guy, that if you could guarantee them being at their peak that we've seen at some point this season, who's the most crucial to the Suns' success in the playoffs, Max?
So it's actually it's a hard question to answer because they're at their absolute peak. I guess it's probably Landry Shamet. He's only been there like twice.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say that that's like fair to even answer it that way. I guess. Oh, that's a really good question. You know what? I'm gonna go with Bam or not Bam, Biyombo. Definitely Bam Adebayo. Yes. Because I think the way he played when he first got here, I just thought he was so good. Honestly, I think that for some reason I'm leaning towards him.
And it's kind of like they're saving him.
Yes,
they're really protecting him with the minutes and rotation during the regular season. So I like that answer. What's your second?
Okay, so this is the other part, sort of the corresponding question to what I just did. So aside from Ayton and Mikal, whose Phoenix Suns players' defense is the most important to winning a title?
Aside from Ayton and Mikal, whose defense?
Yeah, I can give you. I have a crazy answer to give you time to think about if you want.
Well, I was going to say I could go real hipster pick with Booker.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know if that's your crazy answer.
No, it's not my crazy answer. I thought about that one.
Yeah.
My crazy answer, I think, is Cam Johnson.
Okay.
Because if he's awesome defensively, he can stay on the floor and be the offensive guy. I just think the more he can be our fourth best player, the better.
Yep. I think my hipster answer is Booker. My standard answer is Crowder because he just goes unnoticed to what he brings to the whole unit. Mm-hmm. But as an individual defensive player, I think I'd go with the guy that you mentioned before, Biyombo. I just think he can do a couple of things in short spurts that Ayton can't do, like pressure up on the ball at the level of the screen. And I also think he can replicate quite a lot of what Ayton can. So if there's a game with Ayton foul trouble or God forbid an injury or something, I just think that he could be really important on the defensive end for the Suns.
Yeah, and I guess we both could have said JaVale too, right? For similar reasons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of answers to that question. That was a hard one. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Award season, Max. I want you to rank which awards are the most to least likely for the Suns.
Okay.
So you've got our guy this whole episode, Monty Williams for Coach of the Year.
Okay.
You've got Devin Booker for first team All-NBA. Chris Paul for second team All-NBA, Cam Johnson for 6th man of the year and Mikal Bridges first team all defense.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I haven't looked at the odds or anything like that. I really freaking hope Monty Williams is like a lock for Coach of the Year. If he's not, I don't know what the hell's happening.
He's definitely the betting favorite, but
Okay.
last year showed that things could, not go as we expect.
I feel pretty good about it because I think a lot of media members are going to feel really stupid and vote for it. It's like, I'm just going to vote for Monty. I fucked that last year. So I'm going to go number 1 for that one. I think, oh man, it's tough because I think some of the injuries have hurt these. Like, I think Cam Johnson's almost impossible to get that 6th man.
Yeah, I think he's last. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it can happen. I think Chris Paul, 2nd team, is almost impossible now too. He's just missed so much time.
Fair.
So the other ones were, I think, so I'll put Mikal first team defense as the number 2.
Yep.
Second most likely. And I guess it leaves Booker first team, right?
It sure does.
I don't think it'll happen. It's not impossible because of how many injuries there have been. It's pretty hard to say that it'll happen though. I don't think that will happen either.
Yeah, I think Curry's bad form and now this injury really opens up a potential spot there. But there's
So John Morant will definitely get
Yes.
it. So I guess it would be the other one. So who's the competition for the other one?
Yeah, and then it depends whether you get funky with, positions and
Oh yeah, is Luka count?
Yeah.
Can you put Luka there?
yeah, I think you can put him as a forward or a guard and same with a couple of other guys. But yeah, I think I like your order.
Luka's a guard, no chance. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, the 5. Okay, so here's mine. Of the 5 major Eastern Conference contenders, so I'm thinking that's Miami, Milwaukee, Philly, Boston, Brooklyn.
Yep.
Who would you most and least want to face in the NBA Finals if we get
Most and least. Okay. I think I'm taking one of Boston or Brooklyn for most. And my theory on that is I know Boston are on a tear at the moment. I just don't think that's a championship level team. And I think that we would be able to, if we got there, break that down. My theory with Brooklyn is if they finish in the play-in and somehow make the finals, yes, it probably means that they're almost full strength and are on a tear. But I think it also means that they've had one of the hardest runs to the finals. And by that stage, I think that they would be a lame duck to be picked off at that point. So a bit out of the box, but that's what I'd go with there. The other 3 are tough. I mean, last season, Milwaukee, there's an element of familiarity there, but that we know how hard it is. Philly, if they got there, would be, a real kind of runaway train at that point. And Miami are really tough too. I'd go Philly. I just think that Harden and Embiid at the peak of their powers would be really hard to stop in the finals, Max.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because part of the reason why I'm not scared of Philly is I think they're definitely not going to get there because they're not going to be at the peak of their powers. But if they're there though, right?
Yeah, and that's
why for me at least Brooklyn.
Exactly.
Because I get your point that they might be tired, but also like I'm just terrified of those 2 guys. Also, Durant was off. He was hurt for 6 months, or not 6 months, like 2 months. And Kyrie's had half the season because he doesn't want to get vaccinated. So they might actually be a little rested. And then for me, I think most is Boston. Boston, I agree with you. I think they're really good. I just feel like we beat them. I just think we're better than they are.
Yeah, I think you either have a plan to lock down Tatum or you do the old Spurs Amari trick of just letting him go off and stop absolutely everybody else. I just think it's an easier path to defend against.
Agree. Emotionally, though, I want Milwaukee.
Me
and
too.
I promise you, the man of the hour, Monty Williams, wants Milwaukee.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about
It's got I listened to Zach Lowe this morning. He keeps talking about the Suns having this kind of magic dust around them, team of destiny. And I think I agree as much as it scares me. And I also agree that it kind of feels like destiny to go back against the Bucks.
Yeah, the way it feels like so much destiny, and the amount that Suns fans had their hearts ripped out is really terrifying, David.
Very terrifying. But if it is destiny, let's pick our ideal path back to get there, Max. So round 1, Clippers or Wolves?
This is what I think we're the best matchup against.
Yeah.
Wolves. I'm not scared of the Wolves at all.
Yeah, agreed. Round 2, we have to play either the Jazz or the Mavs.
Jazz. I've reached the point where I'm very scared of what Luka Doncic is doing.
That's fair. And round 3, Warriors or Grizz, and I'll let you factor in health wherever you want to on that one.
Yeah, so if it's fully healthy, I certainly would rather play the Grizzlies. They're not just not Steph, Clay, and Dre fully healthy.
Yep, fair enough.
But I think all together, I just think that I don't think we're going to see the Warriors probably. I just don't think they're going to get healthy.
Yep.
But so if I'm balancing all that together, I'd probably take the Grizzlies are scarier overall, I guess.
Okay.
Although I really don't think we're going to lose to the Grizzlies. So actually, I changed my answer because I think the Warriors have a chance of beating us. I don't see us losing to the Grizzlies.
Yep, I like it.
All right. Well, I think that's it, David. That was really fun. I'm really glad we got to have that one about Monty. We did it for Monty.
That was as much fun as I knew it would be, and I hope the listeners agree when they get to this portion of the podcast, Max.
I agree. So that is it for us. The only thing that we ever have to hawk, I guess, is your amazing newsletter, David. So do that.
Yeah, if you're listening on the newsletter, on YouTube, somewhere else that it's randomly appeared, please subscribe. I will hopefully be able to do something before the end of the season. Definitely some stuff during the playoffs. And just to, I guess, put it out there to the world and put us on notice, Max. We had a great deal of fun in the playoffs last year, wrapping up each series. So if it's just the podcast that you like, there's definitely reason to subscribe, because I'm going to say it right now, Max and I will do as many of these during the postseason as we possibly can, right, Max?
I could not agree more. I'm going to try to savor the fact that we're the best team in the NBA. That's a fun thing to enjoy.
Agreed.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate this one.
He's the main person in my career that's pushed me to be authentically me, especially with, the way people tend to categorize me since I've been in the NBA as whatever. I think he's the one person leader that I've had that's pushed me to be myself, even when it's different than what he thinks or what he's about. He's always said, no, you be you. And I'll never forget when I first got into coaching, I went to the Chicago pre-draft camp, and Pop told me, he said, look, there's going to be tons of people telling you to go up there and network and try to get to know this guy and get to know that guy and start a conversation. He said, don't do that. He said, that's not who you are. He said, Mont, you just be you. That's good enough.